Hey everyone, my name is Gladymar. I am the wet clay instructor here at the Firestone Art Studio and Cafe, and I'm here to show you a fun hand building project that you can do at home. Today's project is this little pair of tree votives. They have little holes in them so that you can actually put a little electric tea light or string lights in them, and they'll light up. They're super cute. This one is white with little green splatter, and this one's green with little white splatters. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to make these trees, as well as what comes in the kits that'll make these trees and what you'll need at home to make these trees. So let's start off with the kit. So it looks like this, and inside you'll have a little template. That's a large tree template, and the small tree template, you can go ahead and just cut it out. We also have 2 pounds of clay wrapped up in some plastic so it stays moist before you come and pick it up. Here we have 2 brushes, as well as the paints. So this is CT, which is white, and this is IS, which is the green. And you'll also get some slip. So slip is just clay with a lot of water in it, so it's nice and sticky, and it'll act as our glue today for our project. And a little toothpick. So this toothpick is what we're going to use to cut out the shape of it, also make the holes and attach pieces. So very handy. What you'll need at home are a few items. The first one is a type of cloth. This is just a linen, a painter's drop cloth, but you can also use anything that's cotton based, so like an old t-shirt, anything like that will work. It's just so that the clay doesn't get stuck to the area you're working on. You'll also need a rolling pin. This is a slab project, which means we're gonna roll out the clay and then make our pieces from there. So you'll need a rolling pin. If you don't have one, you can also use another cylindrical item. Like sometimes I've used a glass water bottle or something like that, that is just nice and round like this. You'll also need something to put around your rolling pin like this. But the purpose of this is so that when you're rolling out the clay, you don't accidentally roll it out too thin and then it's too fragile to work with. So you want about 1/4 of an inch. So these yardsticks have about 1/4 of an inch thickness, so that's why we use these. But if you don't have yardsticks like these, you can also use anything that equals about 1/4 of an inch. I've used like kind of thick magazines or thin books, something like that will also work. If you don't have anything like that, you can also just place rubber bands on the ends of your rolling pin, and that will also make sure that you don't go too thin when you're rolling. You'll also need a sponge just for cleaning up throughout the process. A little bit of water, just have a little bit of water here, mostly for when we are painting. And then you'll also need a plastic card. I'm using our Firestone clay pen gift card, but you can really use any. This is kind of in a replacement to a metal rib. If you have ever done anything with slab, once you roll it out, you're gonna actually run this along it so that it has a nice smooth surface. So I'll show you how to do that. So any card will really work, just has a little bit of flexibility, is ideal. And as well as you may need a blow dryer. This project requires the clay to be a little bit on the drier side to work with. So if you have a blow dryer, you can go ahead and blow dry the slab for about 5 minutes on each side. That'll get it to that nice kind of drier texture. If you don't have a blow dryer, or if you don't want to do that, you can also just roll out your piece of slab and just leave it out for about 30 minutes to an hour before you start your project, and it'll also be quite dry. I say 30 minutes to an hour only because it varies depending on the temperature in your home or wherever you're doing the project. If you're in an area where it's quite warm, it'll dry a little bit faster, right? So yeah. So here, let's get started. Okay, So I have my 2 pounds of clay here. I'm just gonna unwrap it. It's in a nice little bow here. Very easy to take out. Like so. And here we have our clay. Put this away. So I'm going to place these 2 yardsticks right around my bit of clay here. What I like to do to start off is just to kind of square off this clay by just slamming it on the table a little bit, like so. Now that it's nice and flat on both sides, I can go ahead and start rolling it out. Like so. Like that. And once I've rolled it out a few times like this, I'm going to go ahead and rotate it. That way I end up with a piece of slab that is nice and squared off instead of just one long piece. So, you could also flip it the opposite way, like so, and continue. So, one more time. I also do that so that it releases the clay from the fabric. Sometimes if you continue to press down like that, the clay will adhere a little bit to the fabric, so taking it off periodically will ensure that it doesn't stick. So here's our slab. Go ahead and do one more this way. And I have a little air bubble, so I'll show you right there. You can see it. Yeah, so right there is a little air bubble. So what I like to do is I'll take my, what I'm using as a metal rib, but just my little gift card here, and I'm going to start smoothing out the clay, like so. Like so. And you see that little air bubble? I'm just gonna lift it up and compress it back down. You don't want any air bubbles in our project. Like so. Cool. So that looks good. You can see here, this piece I obviously did not blow dry. I didn't let dry out, so it's quite soft. As you can see here, I rolled out another bit of clay and I did blow dry it 5 minutes on each side, and it's a lot stiffer, and this is what we want. So you see the difference in just the way that it lands. This one's much more malleable. It has much more water in it. You can also tell by using your thumb to just make an imprint on it. See how easily it imprinted there? Where here, it's a little less. That's another indicator. I'm gonna go ahead and switch out these slabs just for the purpose of this video. So you're not having to watch me blow dry a new piece of slab. I'm gonna use the slab that is already blow dried. So here it is. I'm gonna go ahead and take my 2 templates and place them on to my slab here until they both fit, like so, and like so, right there. Nice. So once I have them on there, I'm gonna go ahead and start to trace them out. If you end up with a piece that might be a little too narrow and they're not both fitting, usually what I'll do is I'll just take a little bit of clay from one side. Let's say this was like that, right? I had a lot more clay. And I'm just gonna adhere it there. And then once I take it out, I'll do the same thing on the bottom, like that. But this one fits real nice. And I'm gonna go ahead and trace and get this out. There. Right, so there's one. Here's my second one. Okay, I'm gonna set this extra clay aside. There we go. So now I have my two trees here. I have my larger tree and my smaller tree. There we go, and they're nice and dry, so they're easy to manipulate, right? So this is gonna be our back side since it has this texture. I'm gonna start by running my fingers along the edges of it just to smooth it out, like this. Some people might feel inclined to just add water to it, and you could if it was dry enough, but I wouldn't recommend adding water to it at this stage, only because it will get a lot softer and harder to work with. So I did that on the back side. Now I'm just gonna run my fingers along the edges of the front side. Nicely smooth it out, like so. Okay, let me do that to my smaller piece as well. Okay, all right. So now we can start turning these into trees. So what I like to do is I'm going to make some texture along the edges of this template here, this tree, just so that once I am forming it, I can just add some slip to it and adhere it. So I'm taking my toothpick here and I'm making little lines along the edge here, like so, little X's. We do this because it makes it much easier for the piece to adhere than if it were just a flat surface. And this ensures that it's not going to start to crack at the seam. So here you don't really see the seam because I cleaned it up, but on the inside you can see it's right here. All right, so you can't really see it because I was able to blend it out and get it nice and even. Thing here. Like so. Okay. So now I'm going to take my small tree here and I'm going to start to roll it. What I like to do is I'll place one finger on one edge and with the other hand I will start to roll it over very gently. Like so. What we're gonna do is overlap these just a tad. Sometimes it helps to just pinch it a little bit, just so that they're a little bit narrower there, right? So that when they overlap, you don't get that thick overlap of clay. So you want to make sure that the edge, the top part here is as close as it can be. Start to roll this onto there, like so. So I kind of have the basic shape that I want. Kind of manipulating this bottom part as well, like so. Okay. This part has to go in a little bit more, like that. Okay. Kind of the shape I'm going for. Yeah. All right. So now I can go ahead and adhere these two pieces with some slip. So here's my slip. I'm gonna go ahead and take a brush. And you don't really need a lot to do this. And I'm gonna go ahead and add slip to both sides of this piece. So wherever it's gonna be adhered, fused together, you want some slip in between there. Like so. Okay. So now I have slip on both sides like this, and I'm gonna start at the top part. So that's the narrowest part, and it's gonna be quite difficult to get my finger in there once it's closed, right? So I'm gonna start to pinch that top part closed, just with my fingers there, and slowly work my way to the bottom. Once you start going towards the bottom, you can use one of your fingers on the inside just to stabilize the piece a bit more and really start to pinch there. And you actually do want some of that slip coming out from those edges, because that means you have a nice seal between those two pieces. So go ahead and go all around there until I reach the bottom. Can start smoothing it out a bit, like so. And it might get a little warped as you're pressing. What I like to do is I'll place it on the table like this and kind of reshape it as we go. Great. And those two seams, you really want to make sure that you're getting it as much as possible, that way you don't have any seam there. If it's starting to crack, you see here I'm having some cracks, that just means that I'm moving that clay enough, warping it, and it doesn't have as much moisture to sustain that. So usually what I'll do there is I'll just take a little bit of water on my finger, very little, and just run it along that area, and I'll smooth it out like so. To the bottom, like so. Now you see here, it kind of has a, call it a tail, right? A part where these two bits of clay overlap, and so you're gonna have a little bit of clay, extra clay at the bottom. So usually what I'll do there is I'll actually make a cut here so that it sits nice and straight, because right now it's a little crooked, right? So, and taking that toothpick, what I like to do first is I'll like score it just to see where it is that I want to cut it. So about there, is that part, and then I'll go ahead and dig in and take out that part that I don't want, like so. Smooth it out with your finger again. And there we go. And I'm also smoothing out that inner part. The inner part doesn't matter too much, right? Because you're not going to be seeing it, but it's nice to just smooth it out as well. Like that. And I'll place it on the table. I just want to make sure that's nice and level. You can also start to tap it around. So I'm just rotating it and tapping just to create a nice level bottom like that. Cool. Here's my little guy. You can see here it has a little bit of a rounded top part here. As you see with these finished ones, I rounded them off a little bit, but they're nice and smooth. So I'm going to do the same for this one. What I'll do is I'll just start to smooth out those edges. So I need a little bit of water. Smooth it out. If you end up with a part here that is kind of more of a circle or bulbous, right? What you can do too is add some water to it and start to pinch it up, and it'll start to kind of smooth it out as well and get it more of a cone shape. Like this. Yeah. The little guy. Nice. I'm pleased with it. So I'm gonna set it aside and do the same thing to the larger one. Again, we're just going to round it off. Like so. Go ahead and add some slip. Okay. Always starting from the top and moving your way down. If you're in this state and you find that the clay is kind of moving all over the place and you can't have a grasp on it, it might be that it's a little too wet. Like if it's, say, sticky, then I would say set it aside for a few minutes, let it dry out a little bit, or just blow dry it again until it has more of a tacky finish, because it can be quite difficult to mold these when they're a little bit too soft. They won't kind of hold themselves up in the same way. And smooth it out. And the same thing, this one's kind of having that little bulb shape at the top. And go ahead and pinch it upward, get it more of a tapered shape. Like so. What's great about this consistency of the clay is that you can really shape it to however you want. So say like your piece is a little kind of bent like that, you can always bend it back and make it straight again, right? So that's cool about hand building, like so. Okay, so here we go. I'm gonna adhere this a little bit better down here. Nice. As long as you don't see those seams, it's very unlikely that it's going to start to crack there, right? But if you have those seams there, as the clay dries, that might separate and you might end up with a crack. So it's good to get rid of any seams of where you attached it. Okay, like this. Same thing, go ahead on the inside, smooth that out. And then that little part that's a little bit taller, go ahead and cut it. Like so. Okay, nice. There's our trees. Cute. Nice. So next is we're gonna be making the little holes that make it a votive, right? That way you can put a little tea light in here or fairy lights. We actually have these little sweet little fairy lights here in the studio. So if you wanted to purchase these, we also have them at the front desk. What I like to do is I'll like make them into a little spiral like this and then place it inside of the tree like that. It's hard to tell in this lighting, but it is nicely lit up. Sweet, huh? So yeah, and to do that, we'll take our trees and our toothpick here, and I'm gonna just start making holes along it. So here, I kind of made them kind of diagonal to each other. So you see, I started one row, and then went up one, and in between, like that, so that they're kind of spread out a bit. You can kind of do them however you want. That's kind of the idea here. It's your tree, it's your project. So if you wanted to make them into a different shape or larger holes, you can totally do that. Kind of get creative with it, you know? But for these particular trees, I'm just gonna keep it simple and make these little holes. So I always start at the bottom row. I'm gonna start by putting the toothpick in here and just spinning it around like so, and that's just to make it a little bit bigger, like that. Rotate, spin it around. I put them about an inch apart. Again, you can switch it up however you'd like so, all the way around. This part's a little thicker. There we go. So that's my first row. I'm gonna start the second row. So again, right above, but kind of in between these two. So right there, making the hole, rotate. So they're all always kind of like an inch apart, right? As they move up, they'll get a little bit smaller. So also, as they start to move up into the tree, I like to start an angle for each hole. That way that the light kind of shines up and out instead of going straight in and that light kind of being blocked by the direction of the hole. So I'll start making them at an angle like this, right? Go ahead and start that, kind of a little angle, rotate it to make it bigger. And these holes that I'm making here seem a little bit larger than the ones in my sample trees, but that's because there is a shrinkage rate with clay. So once it does come out of the kiln and fires, it will be a bit smaller than when you started it. And that's just because the water will evaporate entirely and make it shrink a little bit, which is fine. Go little holes. To move up. So I'm starting to move up now, so I'm not going to make as many holes, probably about 4 or 5, however many fit, like so. Like that. And if you wanted to make one at the top, you totally could too. I don't, just personal preference, but up to you. Yeah, or you could also take like this extra clay and make like a little star and then place it on top. Remember, whenever you're adhering to pieces, you do want to score it, so adding little X's to it and then adding slips. That way it sticks. Or if I wanted to do like a little ornament, I can do that too. So like that. Yeah, it's up to you. So here's a little lantern. Sweet. I did the same thing to this one. Again, starting from the bottom, rotate it. And what I like about these trees, since they're so simple, you can leave them up after Christmas too, you know? Since they're just little holiday trees. Cute little votives. So they make a nice decoration throughout the holidays as well. So they don't have to be Christmas trees, they could just be regular trees. Do whatever you want them to be. Yeah, I'm gonna start making these a little bit further apart. I'm gonna skip one and then make a hole in the other. Move up. Remember doing it at an angle like this so that the light shines through. Like so. Make a few up here as well. And nice. If it starts to come up like that, you can easily just smooth it out. And you're all good. Nice. So you can see down inside, now you have some clay that's coming out. That's normal, that's just where the clay is gonna go. Sometimes I'll just smooth it out a tad. Just with my finger, not to close it. If you do accidentally close it, go ahead and just make the hole again. But I just like to smooth it out just a little bit. Like that. There. So, okay, so we have both our trees done. So now we're gonna go ahead and paint them. You can wait, if you wanted to wait until they're a little bit drier to paint them. It will make it a lot faster because once they're drier, obviously there's less water in them, so it'll absorb the glaze a little bit easier. But you can also do it at this stage. So it's really up to you. Like if you wanted to do the whole process in a day, you certainly could. If you wanted to break it up and paint it the next day, you could also do that. Right, so there's some flexibility there. So here we have our cottontail, which is the white, and I think this is It's Sage, which is the green. These come with the kits. If you wanted extra glaze or extra color, you can certainly purchase that either online or in the studio as well. There we go. I'm gonna go ahead and grab my brush here. And here I have a green tree, the small one, and the white one is the large one. But you can do it really any way. We have enough glaze to switch them up if you'd like as well. So I'm going to start with the larger tree here and just start to paint like so. And you remember, you want pretty generous amount of paint on it, and always doing 3 coats so that it's nice and solid as well. Like this. The first coat always dries pretty quickly. The second coat and third coat may dry a little bit slower, especially if you're working with this wet clay. If you wait for it to be a little bit drier, that glaze will dry quicker. So it's up to you. I don't mind either way. It doesn't impact the way that the glaze works on the clay. It works the same way. It's kind of just your own personal preference. So go really making sure I'm getting all the edges there. Like that. There it is. So that's my first coat of white. And it's okay if you start to like clog up the holes, because at the end, once the glaze has dried enough, I go ahead back in with the toothpick and clean it up just a little bit. Let's set that aside for a sec. And I'm gonna go ahead and paint my small tree in green. So here it is. Again, you just want to run it along the edge of that with a generous amount of paint. Remember, you want to do 3 coats of each color. For the sake of this video, I'm just going to do 1 coat, because then I'm going to show you how I achieved that splatter look on both of mine. So I'm going to do it at this stage, but let's just pretend that I've done 3 coats on each of these, right? So here we go. A little bit more generous there, right? So yeah, let's say I did 3 coats on these, and I can now move on to doing the splatter. Right, so my white tree is going to get a green splatter, and my green tree is going to get a white splatter. So what I like to do in this case is I'll actually water down this glaze just a little bit so that it's a little bit easier to splatter. So I'm just going to go ahead and grab a little bit of green here, place it on my lid like this, and then with the brush I'm just going to dip it in water. Until it's a little bit thinner, and this is going to make it much easier to splatter it on. If you left it the way it was, it would still splatter. It would just give you really big kind of chunks, and I don't want that. So go ahead and smooth it out like that. Okay, so that's pretty good. I have a hefty amount of glaze on my brush here, so what I'm going to do is start to splatter it on. So I'm going to take my white tree here, and I'm going to hold my brush upright like this, and with my other hand I'm just going to start to flick it like that. I'll show you. You could also do this with an old toothbrush if you have one, like a project toothbrush. I have a few of those. It does the same thing because it has stiff bristles and more bristles than a small brush like this. It actually is a bit faster, but works the same. So let's show you how that looks. There's a little bit of splatter there, and you can kind of figure out how much splatter you want. Like if you only want a little bit, you can only put a little bit. If you want a ton, go for it, right? So really up to you. Like that. Yeah, and the same thing I'm gonna do to the cloud white here. So adding a little bit of white to the cap, and then adding a little bit of water to it as well, like this. And then smooth it out like that. Okay. Ooh, that's a good one. I'll show you in a sec. There we go. It's a sweet little splatter on there. Yeah, that's really cool. So yeah, once you've painted them to however you'd like, and they're nice and dry, you can go ahead and write your name on the bottom or on the inside of your trees. You want to write the same thing on both of them, so that way we can package them together and so they don't get mistaken, right? So I usually will write them right on the inside. You see here, I did the initials, the Firestone, TFS, right in there, and the same thing on this little one. So yeah, just write your name on it, anything like that to identify it easily. And that's it. That's the project. You can let these dry out for a few days. Once they're dry to the touch and you're able to move them, you can go ahead and package them right back up in this little bag and bring it into the studio and we will fire it for you. It's about a 1 week turnaround. We only fire it once, so you'll be able to have them in no time, which is really great. So thank you for following along with this project. Hope you enjoy it, and if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. All right, happy holidays.